I think one of my favorite things about the literary life with my kids has been finding that it is not a time of children's books where all the good stuff is waiting for me later. It is the good stuff. Well, hello and welcome back to The Commonplace. My name is Autumn Kern, and we have an exciting day here today because my neighbors apparently are having like a new roof put on or something. I live in the city in like an old row home situation, and so we will be hearing that, as well as the kid next door on the other side who decided to play his drums Thursday afternoon. And it's gonna be in like 4 videos because I batch work and I'm going to be having the sound effects in all of them. So please hang with me because I'm going to talk about a lot of really great things. But today, can you see the stack? We've got a stack. We have a stack of books. We are missing some, but that's okay. I'll throw pictures up when I need them. For the literary life of the Kern children this year thus far. So I have my Mother Culture series. I'm gonna just slide this one in there, in which I talk about engaging in living ideas through the regular habit of reading and how important that is, because the mind is a spiritual thing, ideas are spiritual things, and we need them. And of course we want ideas that pull us towards truth, goodness, and beauty, because those things pull us towards God, who is truth, goodness, and beauty. The same is true for our kids though, and a lot of people know that, right? We have a lot of fear about what is twaddle in the Charlotte Mason world, like, oh no, it just snuck in my library bag, I didn't even see it coming. And we have a lot of pride in only reading like a certain old looking type of book in the classical world. And so I want to kind of bring them together to talk about some really lovely stories for children. I want to make a couple of notes, as I always do, that first, there is a right time to introduce a book to a child. And it might be different than other children. So just like if you have, an adult friend and they maybe are going to need some extra courage for what's coming, or they may be having a really hard time, or they may be really excited and just like in a season of rejoicing, and you think, oh, I have the book for you. It's not that you think you have the book that will show them what they need to learn real quick, or it's not that you have this book that you're gonna beat them over the head until they get the right idea. No, it's you're offering them a friend, a literary friend, and you need to do the same thing with your kids. So it is an actual skill to develop as the mother teacher, home librarian, if you will, on how to give your children the right book at the right time. And don't worry if you're like, yeah, I've totally flopped. We're gonna actually talk about a series in here that I kept trying to introduce too early and it wasn't working, but now it is. That's good, because it's a Charlotte Mason classic and we just weren't Charlotte Mason enough without it. I'm just kidding. The second note is just that these are not all the books my children have read this year. I'm not showing that because we just have a regular diet of the great picture books, like The Frog and Toad, The Beatrix Potter, The Brambley Hedge, all of those sorts of books. Winnie the Pooh, I can't believe I forgot Pooh. My kids will watch this and be like, Pooh. We read through those all the time. And now my oldest, who is in Form 1A lower, 2nd grade, she reads those now as part of her reading lessons, and she reads them to the boys. And so those are kind of always happening. And then my husband has reading time with my children as well. And that's kind of a helpful tip here. We have like a mom read aloud and a dad read aloud going simultaneously. And they happen kind of at the same time every day. I kind of have tea time, he kind of has pre-bedtime. And those mean that we have like 2 kind of streams of books going. And then lastly, I'm not including any of our schoolwork. So we read classic literature for our term novels, our tales in literature. So we have our fairy tales and our folk tales, things like that. I'm not including that either. This is just kind of the extra family culture read aloud stuff. And so that's the first breakdown. The second reason why I'm not doing the full list is that I think full list can be a real burden for moms. I think you can either be really impressed or really unimpressed, I guess, at how much some children are reading or being read to. And that's not the mission here. Whenever I give my book list or whenever I explain things like this, I never give the full scope of anything, because I think there's a real danger in the ideas of, I read 75 books this year, as if that's like something that is good on its own, but we don't know if you read them well or if they were good books, or if you'll ever return to them again. And honestly, the mark of really enjoying a book is how many times you have read it. So this is not the full list, and that's intentional, and I hope that helps you as you engage with these sorts of things as you come in through the wardrobe into the classical Charlotte Mason world, because everybody loves to tell you what's in their morning basket and all the books they read that year. But we're gonna try to do this in a humanizing way. So to kick it off, some of the things that my husband has read to the kids, I have not pulled all those books, but he's been reading through Narnia. I've said enough about Narnia, so I don't need to say any more. They went through The Hobbit a couple of times, I think twice. They love The Hobbit. They tried to get into the trilogy and the S one that I can never say, the Silmarillion, is that correct? And they abandoned that quite quickly. And he also read Animal Farm to them. That's been a really funny one because we have those Schleich or whatever animal figurines, and they'll play Animal Farm, which if you know the like understory to Animal Farm is kind of funny to hear a 6, 5, and 3-year-old playing Animal Farm. But onto the books that I've read them because they've been fantastic. Now I make a literary life for myself every year. It's kind of the path I'm going to take through the literary world for the year. And it's not that I can't change it. It's not that it's a blood covenant. It's just so that I aim in the direction I want to aim. As we moms know, if you don't have a plan, a lot of times things can just disappear from you. So I have this aim and this trajectory, so I know where I want to go, and I know of the great books that I've purchased but haven't read yet and wanted to really get to this year. And it helps me keep from buying too many books or getting, shiny book syndrome or feeling like I'm not really making any progress. But I do the same thing for my kids. And so that is what this list kind of shows you. And it's only, of course, a partial list because we're only in August, but it shows you the aim that I want to take my children on this literary life. And one thing that's really important to me when I pick stories, and I find that the authors I continue to return to for my children are the ones that show me what it's like inside a child's mind. I'll go and start with Swallows and Amazons because this is the first one that helped me see that this is what I've been doing with books. So Swallows and Amazons, if you do not know about this series, you definitely need to grab it. We have another sibling set. We're very fond of sibling sets who have a summer adventure on an island, and they have to go through ordinary parts of childhood where they have to be courageous and they have to repent and they have to solve mystery and think well of others and suffer some of their own consequences, all these sorts of things. But what I love about the way Arthur Ransom writes is that he takes you into the mind of a child. The entire book is written from the inside out as if everything's a game. So the way your children fully enter a world of being on a pirate ship or fighting in the woods or taking a flag and holding it captive, whatever it is, they do that in ordinary time, in their backyard, holding a dishcloth. But to them, the whole world has been built out, and they're being noble, and they're being good, and they're being brave, and that's how they see it. And so one of the things that happens in this book is the children, their language actually stays the same. So like when they're talking about their mother, for a while she's just Queen Elizabeth, or then all adults are the natives, because they are so immersed in the world they've built out. And I really like that. You'll see this through a number of the books that I'm pulling today. I like that because it helps me see the nobility in childhood. They are still immature. They still make very childlike bad decisions, but you see the intent there was aiming towards goodness. It did not come out as goodness. Any adult who is busy and getting kind of blindsided by their children's antics could easily see it as an annoyance, or at worst, like some sort of sin or something. But within the heart of the child, their intention was good. We're going to talk about another book by, I actually have to grab it, I don't think it's in my pile, by Edith Nesbit, The Wouldbegoods. And in that one, the children know what they did ultimately was wrong, like they've realized this, but they're still very proud of themselves for how clever they were to think of it in the first place. I think that is how the mind of a child works. It's why when they're being all sorts of wildly and, bad, you're like, guys, and they're like, whoa, what? Like they're completely blindsided. They were doing anything that might cause alarm from your mom. It's because within their own world, they see things very differently. And so I like books that allow me to see that. Now, I've talked about Swallows before. We have the Pajama Running Club, and one of the things that we do is we yell, Kernels don't quit, quitters don't get tea. And we got that from a telegram set in the beginning, which is, that duffers drown. So if they're not duffers, they won't drown, and therefore they are free to go on this adventure. And just those little phrasings can really stick in the mind of a child, and then they are free to play. I've talked about our war a couple of times now. It's really coming out quite a bit, but our war with another family, and I had the idea after finishing Swallows and Amazons. I was like, why can't we battle anyone? Who do we know that we could have an epic fight with? And that is actually how it came. So beware, moms, that reading great children's books will actually change your life as well. Okay, since I mentioned more long form in that last one about the mind of a child, I'm gonna run through the rest, I think really build that out. So Edith Nesbit, I went and grabbed it. This is the Wouldbegoods. I love Nesbit. I actually have more of her in here, and I find that I do that when I find someone that I think respects a child in a way that acknowledges their personhood and takes them seriously on the grounds that they ought to, which we modern adults are not good at. If you read Nesbit, or you read Lewis, or you read Tolkien or Chesterton, the way they speak about children, and even though Lewis will say he had disordered love, he didn't enjoy small children, but the way they write to them and speak to them and write to them in stories, the way they actually talk to them in a story, shows an immense respect for the personhood of a child, and they take them seriously. And I think that's tremendous. And so the Wouldbegoods is another sibling set. Like I said, they're also proud of themselves for how clever they are, even though they end up in trouble. And another one from Edith Nesbit is the Book of Dragons. It's a bunch of individual stories, so it's actually, they're a little lengthy, but they're great for like pre-bed or over a long tea time. And you get to work through all of these different well, they are dragons, I don't know why I did that, dragons in the lands of fairies and princesses and in London and all these things. And these children have to figure out how to take care of the dragon. And I've said this before, if you think that stories that include dragons and magic are unhelpful to children because they're trying to learn what's real, then I would push you to consider what is ultimately real in the larger immaterial reality of God's creation that we can't see, because we most certainly live in a world of dragons. And your children need to know that there is a St. George. And there is a St. George in one of these, and he's pretty great. He's like, I can't really help you guys anymore. But he does give them a hot tip about the weather, which helps. So anyways, these are also excellent. So I love Edith Nesbit. If you come across anything by Nesbit, you should grab it for your kids. You will definitely find a new family favorite. Oh, you know what I couldn't find? I couldn't find The Railway Children, which is also Edith Nesbit. And that is also a sibling set who, when their father is mysteriously taken away and they have to go and live with their mother in this kind of lowly home situation when they were used to the finer things of life, they go on these great adventures and they learn these lovely things. And my children are often quoting from The Railway Children, because it's one of the only sibling sets that we have where there's a daughter who is the oldest, and so that kind of fits more of our family structure, and they were able to take on these roles a little bit more. But I will often hear them saying things like, let's not quarrel. They have a lot of British vocabulary and phrasing. Like, it's because the books we read, they were trying to explain to our violin and cello teacher, Miss Emma, a queen, about their new flashlights, and they were all like, these are our torches. These are our torches. And she kept saying, oh, your flashlight. And they were like, no, it's a torch. It's because they hang out with the Pevensies in their head all the time. It's a torch. So anyways, Railway Children is another great one. We absolutely loved that one. I wept at the end of it. So I highly recommend anything by Edith Nesbit. Just buy it. Now, in the same world as Edith Nesbit, you have the Inklings. You have C.S. Lewis. You have Tolkien. You also have someone named Owen Barfield. Now, he was part of the crew at Oxford that would engage in these ideas and kind of have these fun intellectual debates and writing encouragement time with Lewis and others. But he only wrote one fairy tale before I think he went off to be a solicitor or a lawyer. I think that's right. But Owen Barfield wrote The Silver Trumpet. And a fun fact that my friend Emily Thomas told me about, and I think by this point her interview should have released, so you should know exactly who she is. She told me that Lucy Barfield is the Lucy to whom The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is dedicated, because C.S. Lewis was her godfather. And so I just love knowing that they had this connection. And Tolkien's kids said that The Silver Trumpet was better than his books, and they were only playing it all the time. So it's just fun to think, like, you've created Lord of the Rings and your kids are like, we like this guy's story better. It sounds like kids. So anyways, Owen Barfield wrote The Silver Trumpet. I do not have it. I will show you a picture of it. Miss Emily Thomas, she lent it to our family. She was very kind to lend it from her home library. It is a hard one to track down. It's pretty expensive when you do, and it's always, I think, an ugly paperback, which is a problem for me. So I'm hunting still for the great, beautiful hardback version, but it's a fantastic fairy tale. If your kids have read it, or if you know it, then Rudy 2, Rudy 2, Rudy 2, 2, 2 should mean something to you. But every time the silver trumpet is blown, something comes alive again in the chest of the person. And I love this because I think so much in our work and then in our literary life, something that Chesterton talks about, which is you do not need to go around telling everyone what they need to do. Instead, you need to bring back to life the good ideas that are already there. And so we do have this longing for truth and for goodness and beauty. It's built into us as worshipers. We're going to act on these certain practices and pursuits. It's just that we're not always aiming in the right direction. So how can we bring back to life what's there and allow our chest to kind of come back so that our head can rule our belly? This is all stuff we've been talking about in the podcast this season. Anyways, fairy tales do that. We all live in a fairy tale, is what Chesterton says. And The Silver Trumpet was a delight. And so we read it pretty quickly. I would say probably over the course of maybe two weeks of tea time. So it's not super long if you're able to get your hands on it, but it is deeply impactful. And that actually reminds me that I wanted to say that when you are working through a book, work with the pace of your children's attention. Don't set up a schedule of like, we'll do this many chapters at a time, or this every certain, increment of day. Don't do that. Watch for your children's attention. I will usually let my kids do something with their hands quietly. And then if I notice that maybe they're getting a little absorbed elsewhere, I'll stop reading and see how long it takes someone to look up or to say, hey, keep going. And then I know that, oh, I still have their attention. Always stop before you lose their attention. Okay, so next one with the whole, how do I get into the mind of a child? The plays of J.M. Barrie, Peter Pan. And yes, I'm talking about the play Peter Pan, or the, originally adapted for a longer story form, not Disney. I do not like Disney Peter Pan. No one is surprised. However, I love to play Peter Pan. I was actually kind of slow on reading this to my kids because I really don't like the Disney Pan. I actually do think he is conceited in the modern sense, in the grown-up sense. I think he's very mean. I don't find him noble. Play Peter, if you have not met him, he is delightful, and he is very much a little boy. And the thing about little boys is boyhood is a mystery even to men once they've grown out of it. I think that's also Chesterton. This video, sponsored today by G.K. Chesterton. It actually is just a magical time being a young boy. It's just very different, the world they live in and the way they engage and the way they understand what's happening around them. And Peter Pan grew a soft spot for me in understanding how my boys are learning. It also, very surprisingly, helped my daughter understand her brothers better, which I wasn't expecting. I was reading it, we were all in fits of tears, like laughing so hard many times during the play. It is hilarious. But I did not expect her to take to heart some of the things like, boys are always trying to fight something. They want to fight what they think is evil. How do we direct them towards what's good? Of course, actually, she does kind of use some of that language. I'm actually going to interview her for the Common House because who better to interview than an actual Charlotte Mason child? But it helped her see that so much of their shenanigans and their, crazy energy and jumping around and flying and building and tearing down, so much of what they're doing is building out a world that makes sense. And as long as you are feeding your sons living ideas and you are directing them in their habits towards what's good and you're building that atmosphere of what's good, they are learning what they ought to be fighting for because they're going to keep struggling to fight and defend something. We have a little family catechism for our boys. They're like, who do you protect? And they shout, ladies and babies. And they actually take that really seriously. And Peter Pan is someone who thinks girls are lovely, different, not to take care of him, of course, but they're very lovely and they need to be protected. And that's why, of course, they need the windy mother. But Barrie, so delightful and really brought to life the idea that actually Emily talked about in her interview of never using the word just. Oh, it's just a couch fortress. Oh, it's just a dog. Oh, it's just some sticks together, because little boys don't see the world that way. Really, we shouldn't see the world that way, right? But little boys are uniquely gifted in seeing an entire world that they can build and they can order and they can protect and defend. And we need to encourage that and understand that so that we don't do great harm by destroying it. Okay, so the next one is Farmer Boy. And this is the one that I wanted to bring out for introducing books at the wrong time. So we tried to read Little House on the Prairie or Little House in the Big Woods first. It fell flat with my kids. They really didn't enjoy it, and I didn't understand why, because it is like one of the books in the Charlotte Mason world. But I introduced it twice, and they just did not bite. And they are kids who love to be out of doors. They love to be with animals. They love to be on adventures. They love to, work with their hands, and it just wasn't landing with them. And so someone recommended I start with Farmer Boy instead, and they've loved it. So we follow Almanzo Wilder in this one, so the one that Laura Ingalls is going to marry eventually. And it's just a beautiful picture of life for this little 9-year-old boy and all the different things he does on a farm. And we are about one chapter out. This is our current read. We have one chapter left. And what's really funny is that Eliza Jane and Royal, his older brother, they've just come home from school along with Alice, but Alice is happy to be home. These two have come home in a mood. Eliza Jane is using her newfound education to embarrass her family. Like, she tries to tell her father that no one drinks tea from the saucer anymore. It's only proper to drink it from the cup. I thought that was funny because I would definitely correct my children for drinking tea from their saucer. I didn't know that was a thing. But she comes in and she's, attempting to wound by making herself look educated, something that would just break my heart if I saw my children doing that with their classical education in the future, because the ideas they engage with are not going to be commonplace. Honestly, in most of the spheres they'll move. I hope it is. I hope we start a revolution. But the things that they will hopefully learn, and if they love them, they shouldn't do that. But the things they'll learn could really be used as weapons, and that would just break my heart. But the second thing is that Royal has come home. He's like, I don't want to be a farmer, and you're kind of dumb if you do want to be a farmer. I'm going to go live in the city and have a shop, and I will have a coachman who drives my horse. And of course, Almanzo thinks, who would ever want someone else to drive their horse? Horses are so lovely. But my favorite thing was that my daughter popped up and said, what are they teaching them at those schools? You know, she's not wrong. And so I look forward to her joining the Commonplace staff in a couple of years. Now, this is one I don't think any of you have ever read. It's called Anne of Green Gables. It was written by a woman named Lucy Maud Montgomery. I highly recommend it. Again, probably don't know about it. I'm just kidding. Anne of Green Gables, a story of imagination, of virtue, of love and restoration. I love Anne. Everyone rightly loves Anne. So I read this one at the beginning of the year, and it definitely caught my daughter's attention. Mostly the boys were around, but we started doing a thing this year where if you were just like mildly to moderate sick, not extremely sick, you did not have the option of watching a movie anymore. You did have the option of mom reading to you the entire day. And so we did this one in about 2 days of sickness, which the pacing, maybe not great if you want to retain for long term, but when mom is willing to read for 8 hours in a day, you can really, you know, make some ground in a book. And so we read it then, and I feel like it sparked all the joy needed to get us through the end of winter in order to make it to spring. And it's a classic for a reason. I was just talking to Heidi White, and I believe her interview has already come out by the time you'll see this, or if not, it's the next one. And she was saying that Anne is still a living picture in her mind, and she still goes to read this for herself, like just for the nourishment of her own soul. And if you don't know, Heidi is someone who reads very widely and deeply. So Anne has stuck. She's foundational. Now, I don't know if you know about C.S. Lewis's first book. It's called Boxen. So Lewis was a prolific writer starting from a very young age. His brother Warnie, they wrote together, and it was a fun little world they created. First in the top of a biscuit tin, they started to put this world together, and they actually started to write stories. And so Boxen is the imaginary world of C.S. Lewis and his brother Warnie. And we read this year for summer book club. So one, we read the book. I needed to put it in the list, but two, I wanted to explain how you could do a book club with your kids. So pick a great story. We obviously picked this one. The chapters were very short. You can see the beginnings of Narnia in some ways already. Like some of the characters, you're like, I see you fell in love with this idea when you were a kid, Lewis. But we had a commonplace book, and so what we each did was, you know, another family and us, what we did is that we would read to our kids. They had to either ask a question or pick a couple of quotes they wanted to commonplace, and then we brought those to book club to share with each other. Book club lasts maybe 10 minutes, honestly. There were always snacks. We had, we dressed up like old Englishmen, of course, like we were the Inklings, and we had these little pins that when we put them on, they took us to the Eagle and Child, which is where Lewis and his friends met in Oxford. I've heard it's closed. I hope it's not. I've been before, but I would love to take my children. And so, you know, everyone needs to see where C.S. Lewis sat. But yeah, we put on our pens and they would transport us to the Eagle and Child. Our hostess would have snacks. We would go around and share commonplace quotes, and we would share our questions and let the other kids answer them. And that was pretty much it. It was Kids Summer Book Club, but that's one way to invite your young children into the practice of engaging with ideas in a community setting in a really like low stress sort of way. And so Boxen I recommend as a great book club pick for kids. Now I can't find a place to hang the moon because a child definitely has stolen it from the general book piles, but A Place to Hang the Moon is actually a newer book, and it was another one of our sick read alouds this year. This one I think we read in a day. My daughter and I could not put it down. And it's, again, what do you know, another sibling set who is displaced in the middle of World War II. They are a set that are sent out of London, except they actually are in need of real parents. So their grandmother, their guardian, has died, and they are very wealthy, but they are told not to tell anyone until they find their forever home. And so they go on this adventure and misadventure of being in these different families' homes throughout the World War II evacuee program until they finally land where they ought to be. And there's a librarian, of course, who takes great care of them as she gets to know them. And she has this line where she's found out some terrible news. I won't ruin it for you, but she's very sad. And then she learns that it's one of the children's birthday, and she says, she's gonna plan a party, of course. And they're like, no, you're very sad. And she says, no, I've had a wallow, and now it's time for a do. I took that to heart. I have used that phrase so many times. I've given it to friends that, yes, hard things happen, but once you have your wallow, now it's time to do, and to do good for others and for the place you are in. And so A Place to Hang a Moon, really lovely. Lots of Pevensey tie-ins, I feel like. My kids think that every story is situated in World War II. When we actually get there in history, their minds are going to be blown. Okay, and lastly, we have Pinocchio. Again, not Disney. Definitely not Disney. Disney ruined this. The original Pinocchio. And so Pinocchio made me laugh, made my children laugh because they thought he was just ridiculous at different points, made me laugh because he's such a child. So there is a point at the beginning where Pinocchio's been going on for pages about how he's starving. Like nothing could be worse than how hungry he is, right? And when Geppetto finally comes home and he offers him the meager food that's in his pocket, Pinocchio's immediate response is, oh, I'll only eat it if you peel it. And it just like makes me think of all the children who are like, I'm so hungry, I'm so hungry, I'm so hungry. Like, here, you can have a carrot or an apple or a piece of cheese. I'm like, oh no. Only if you cut the cheese into stars. What? I thought you were starving. So Pinocchio has all these antics like that that I laughed at because they're so true to being a child. But my children laughed at because they were falling in love with the character. And Pinocchio really tore on the heartstrings of my kids. He makes many bad decisions. You think he's learning, and he does to a certain degree, and then he goes back to his old ways, and this happens over and over again. And my children were just riveted. They would hope without end that Pinocchio would finally do what was right, and then he would fail them, and they would be so sad, but we'd have to keep reading because they knew that couldn't be the end. And that is what I love about a really good children's story too, is that your mythic and your moral imaginations, the part of you that will hold on until the end because good must triumph, is so evident. And Pinocchio goes from being a wooden, puppet, what are they called? Marionette, a wooden marionette, to being a real boy. And it's love that, ultimately changes us into being real. Also Velveteen Rabbit, that would be a good one to read too. So anyways, those are just some of the books to make up the literary life of the Kernels this year. I hope maybe you found a good one. If you have any you'd like to add, or if you've read any of these, please let me know what you thought, what your kids thought, and I will see you in a couple of weeks.